I told you it was coming, and it is coming now. What I'm talking about is the Xiaomi Mi 9 stock camera app comparison with the Gcam Mod. Because a lot of you said you definitely need to try that because it's the definite better camera app. And some people were also curious of how much better it is. But what I also have to say, this is a very early port, which means it's also not specifically done for the Mi 9 just yet. And it will get even better in time. Because I have to say from my testings, and we will see that obviously it is not better in all situations just yet, but in many it definitely makes quite some improvements. And when I'm talking about improvements, I also have to mention one thing. The way I judged pictures side by side for the last few years was pretty much just archaic, inconvenient, and also kind of just dumb. It was such a hassle and it took me so much time. Now I found a way better solution, so we can actually also zoom into the pictures side by side and compare them way better, so we can see all the little details that one camera maybe makes better than the other one. But before we are going to do that, I want to show you what I'm actually talking about when I'm saying Gcam port, because this should not be mistaken with the Google camera that you can get from the store. This you have to download. The link will be down in the description. And the newest version that I have so far, which people told me is the one to get, is MGC 6.1021 Arnova Xcam Mi 9 version 6. And once you install that, it looks like this. This is pretty much just a port from the Pixel-free camera app, because you can see, for example, the features. We have lens blur, panorama, portrait, camera, video, more. Under more, we have night sight, photosphere, photo booth, slow motion settings, which we'll get into just in a second. But so you can see the options. For example, here we have timer, HDR plus, and everything else. And just so you also know this, I will use for all my pictures the way this app came straight out of the box, and also the Xiaomi app straight off the box. So HDR is auto, here HDR plus is auto. So I left it just the way that most people would get this app and then just use it. Because if you just check the options, we have so many here. And it would take so much time to talk about that, which we are not going to do. This is a way more advanced app actually than the normal Pixel app, because it just included so many extra features, small little tweaks, which makes this better than the Xiaomi stock app. But not in all situations. But let's actually check that a little bit closer on. And this is what I will be using from now on for my comparisons. Actually, also from me, but also to show you this. And the app is called, or the program is called Fast on Image Viewer. Because what it allows me actually is just to highlight a few pictures and then press P. And then we can see them all side by side. I can zoom in and move them, and you can see this all for all of them. Now, what I want to mention is here that if there are 4 pictures, the upper 2 ones are with the stock camera app, and the lower 2 ones at the bottom are made with the Gcam port. And here, for example, in these situations, the left one is just a normal picture as it is, and then the other one is, for example, the night mode here. So let's just check every picture as we see it right now. Then we will zoom in and check a few details, because, for example, the normal picture actually from the Xiaomi stock camera app looks quite good. And what happens generally with those night mode features is that it looks like a bright light is shining on them. What happens though with the Google night sight mode is that it actually looks like you took that picture on a brighter part of the day. Sometimes that's better, but sometimes, as you can see here, it turns out also super unrealistic because it's way too cold. And generally also a thing that I've noticed on the Gcam app, that pictures just get colder. But let's actually zoom in now, and what you can see here now, here, the stock camera app is quite blurry, not a lot of details. What the night mode does is it sharpens up things, but artificially, because you don't really get more details. Because even just looking out of the box at the pictures of the Gcam, normally it already has more features, but once we use night sight, we can see that we definitely get more details out of it. But let's check a few more pictures here. And this is the really handy feature about this one, because as you can see here, the picture out of the box, I have to say this. Why I'm not the biggest fan of night sight is that it usually just doesn't look as it looks in reality. Usually the normal picture looks more real. If you want to see more details, okay, that's something different. Because as you can see, the normal picture already from the stock app looks decent. It looks a little bit better with the Google Cam, because as you can see with the night mode, it looks brighter. But if we zoom in, we don't really actually get that much more details. But we do get with Google's night sight mode, because it gets a little bit sharper and details just are a little bit more obvious. And this will be even more so obvious in the next few samples. For example, here, this is once again what I meant. The Google night sight mode looks like this picture was almost taken at a day, but it's just not realistic. And if I would have to judge the most realistic picture, it would be definitely the 2 on the left. And what I've noticed, for example, on the Mi 9, that there is sometimes a little bit of a gray shade above it where it should be black. But the picture actually looks quite okay. As you can see, not a whole lot of detail. It's actually better on the Google app. And in this case, with the night side, because you have to kind of be with a steady hand here, we actually lost it. But I guess if I would have had it on a tripod, because all of these shots were done handheld, it doesn't look much better. But as we can see, once again, we get, with the Google Cam already out of the box, a little bit of a more pleasing picture with more details, sharpness, more clarity. And you will see this in a few more samples, and I will not take too much time for these night shots anymore, even though I know how important low light is for you. But here is one where it actually gets super obvious, because as you can see, all pictures look similar besides the one with night side, because this is the biggest issue, the difference here. If we check now the Xiaomi app, here the detail in the field, there is none anymore, and not even with night side. Where the Google Cam already picked up a lot more of the field, and once we look at the night side mode, here we can actually see a lot of the field with a lot of details, and everything in the foreground is sharper, with more details. We can see this once we zoom in, we can see way more here than here, and obviously heavily zoomed in, those pictures don't look great anymore, but that is to be expected if we talk about low light pictures. I'm gonna just skip the next ones here and go for these, for example, here. Here, for example, the Google Cam didn't fare so well in night side, because this looks actually quite mushy. Here it looks a little bit too dark. So this just shows that not in all situations also night side or the Google Camera app has to work better. I mean, obviously also always depends if you have maybe an unlucky shot, because once again here, super dark with this odd little gray shadow above it, which doesn't look all that great. It looks already way better with the Google Cam, with night side. I mean, if we zoom in, this is not really detailed anymore, which looks way better and way brighter in general with night side. Now, what I want to show here is that the actual benefit of the night side mode in, I would say, normal room conditions with a little bit of lighting actually is pretty much mostly gone, because as you can see here, this is what I meant. The picture gets a little bit colder with night side. I mean, it gets a little bit more details. It looks the sharpest here with the night mode of the Xiaomi. But that is because they just heavily oversharpened it. Because if we zoom in, you can see the text. It got a little bit blurry. I didn't get that right. But if you just would look at normal Google Cam, and then here, if we actually zoom in, you can see way more artifacts here. And this is just not right anymore. This looks better with the Google Cam. So I don't want to praise this cam too much, but I mean, it is quite obvious of how good the actual quality is. So now let's do some side-by-side pictures with outside pictures in low light. And if we zoom in, I mean, I think it's obvious that it picked up a little bit more. And what you will also know, obviously also see on the Google Cam, that it, especially due to the HDR mode, has a little bit more contrast. It looks a little bit, usually with a little bit more dynamic range. Often it's also sharper, but sometimes it's actually artificially sharper. But I would say if I just look at the picture from normal situations, most of them, especially here, as you can see here, just look sharper. So this is an ongoing proof, ongoing proofing. As you can see here, I mean, it's not always better, but if we zoom in, just especially here, the details in the leaves are better. I mean, the contrast, and I personally think it's more pleasing. Most people, and that's why I think so many people are praising the cam. At first it looks better. It's not always more accurate, because for example here, you can, if we zoom really closely in, you can see a lot more details than here. This looks way more blurry already, a lot softer, with a lot more details here. I mean, I have to give it to them. Google and their post-processing is really good. Now, for example, here in this picture, actually not that much of a difference at first glance. And both pictures actually look good. And I don't want to say that the stock Xiaomi app doesn't do a good job. But if we go closer in here, for example, you will see that once again in darkness we have this kind of gray whale. But if we zoom in onto the flower, here it looks way more accented. We get the sharp outlines, where here there is a little bit of a weird haze already. So landscape is where we see more details, more sharpness in general, just better post-processing of the standard app. Now, for example, also here, usually a little bit darker, but more dynamic range on the Google Cam. But like I said, I would personally already say that even the normal camera app does an absolutely nice job, absolutely. Because for example here, if we really zoom in closely, you can see these are still very, very similar. Where I notice the difference is, for example, here. You can see here we have a lot more details, where here things already get a little bit mushy. We have still way more details here. So I don't really know how they get it done. But it actually, even though it uses the same sensor, here you can see it again, it just picks up more details. So next picture, let's use this. Here we, for example, can see that we have a better contrast. I mean, this sometimes maybe a little bit more saturation would be nice, or a little bit more HDR in some way. Of course, you could bump that up in the app already, but it's not quite the same. So let's take a few pictures more here. You can see a little bit darker but brighter passages, more details. If we would zoom in, you can see that. I mean, sharpness in most situations, unless you actually zoom in, is something you won't really notice. You really need to, with kind of like this app, check things up close to see a benefit. Because in these situations, most people, I think, would maybe even say that the left picture looks better than the right one. If you look closer, if you know what you're looking for example, like here, this is way more mushy, and also the texture here in the... But, I mean, does it really matter? I mean, if you want the best possible picture, sure, then absolutely get it. Now here, for example, we have 4 more pictures with, once again, a night side mode. And here we can see that the Xiaomi just pretty much just sharpens up the picture and bumps up the contrast. Where in some situations here, I didn't get it quite right, the Google Cam doesn't have that much of the upper hand anymore. Because like I said, if we have solid lighting conditions, then it can't quite do what it does in real low light situations. Because you can see this here. We lost sharpness here because we had a little bit of a wobble, because you have to have steady hands. This worked out better on Xiaomi. So I would say if you are in normal lighting conditions, I think the benefit is mostly actually gone. Here, for example, though, normal picture here with the Google Cam, with the stock cam, and then with night side mode on the front facing cam. Huge difference. I mean, this looks a little bit over the top, but yeah. Now the next 4 pictures. This is now on the top, on the left, for example, here. This is the normal picture, and this is with portrait mode. And now here is one difference. When I saw these pictures at first, I thought of how much more extremely better the Google Cam is. But I mean, I just had to say this, from a color standpoint, the stock cam makes a way better job, because my face doesn't look that reddish, and it also over sharpens quite a lot on the front facing cam. This looks a little bit softer, but just way more realistic in terms of colors. And for example, if you check the outlining here of the portrait mode, it lost a little bit here. But as you can see here on the stock app, I mean on the Gcam app, I have actually a shimmer around. So the portrait mode, I think, needs a little bit more work than the normal cam needs. And here, for example, this is what I mean. This is where I think the port just needs optimization, because I had these issues, and you will see this later on in the video, with the exposure where the jump and stuff is completely off. Because the Xiaomi does an actually super nice job, nice sharp picture in both situations, with a good kind of cutout for the portrait, which also is quite good here in this case. But I mean, I don't have to talk about the colors. And once again, here it is super obvious if you go in closer. I mean, at first glance, you would definitely say the Google does a way better job. I mean, I wouldn't maybe use yet the portrait mode, because as you can see the shimmer here. I mean, if you have proper hair, it might work better. But if you take a look at the left one, this looks so good, but it just looks over the top. This looks over sharpened. I mean, it doesn't look, it is. Okay, what else is there to show? Okay, last pictures, and then I'm gonna leave you off with the videos in silence. I'm not gonna really say much. So as you can see here, once again. So let me actually get back and tell you this much. We've covered that. So let's summarize this, and then let's talk about the video. So for low light pictures, especially very low light conditions, night side is way better than the Xiaomi app. If we have normal lighting conditions, the big advantage is actually a little bit gone already. Mostly actually. And for normal situations, if it's normal daylight, I would generally just say there are more details in the Gcam app, there is more sharpness, but without actually going too extreme. There is a little bit of nicer saturation, a little bit more contrast, but a nicer way contrast. And I let them do whatever they did by auto. So sometimes they used HDR, actually in both cases they used it at the same time. So that's why there wasn't a huge difference. And I mean, most normal people maybe wouldn't even notice the difference, and you need a monitor. I mean, on a phone, it's really hard to tell the difference. You do if you want to look at it, but yeah. And for selfies, I would say as long as you want the super contrast, the nice looking picture that in my situations, for example, is too red. Maybe for the realistic more picture, and that's what I meant, that for the Gcam isn't always better. For the front facing cam, I would actually stick still with the stock cam. Now about the videos, I'm just gonna now show you all the videos, and I'm also gonna show you, for example, an audio sample, because someone said that there is a huge improvement of the microphone quality with the Google Cam app. I don't really hear that. There is a little bit of more of a sibilance and of a hiss on the stock cam compared to the Google Cam, but the Google Cam didn't really improve the actual richness of the sound or the quality. So there wasn't much of a best one. A little bit, yes, but what it actually improves more, I would say, is the general colors. I mean, look still off, but there is more sharpness and there is stabilization, which the selfie cam doesn't have. If you look at the main video, I mean, just look at the video, then judge your own. I don't want to say anything here. I'll leave you just like with that. And this was it. Let me actually now know, before I leave you alone with the videos, if you like this kind of comparison that goes a little bit more in detail, because people said that you can't really judge two photos side by side because you have to zoom in, and therefore people want the original images, and I will try to kind of sort those out to get that done. But so far, is it helpful to zoom in and talk about it in these details side by side? I think it's actually super helpful, because now I'm gonna do all my camera comparison and mode comparisons with this app, because it allows me to side by side see that. And you will see this the next time with Xiaomi Mi 9 versus Samsung Galaxy S10 comparison, because that one looks very interesting, because both do pictures and videos in a completely different way. Color science from Samsung is up the wazoo, and I don't really mean in a positive way, but that's that. Until next time, and now the videos. Okay, so this is just a quick reference video so you can check the actual default sound of the microphone with the stock camera app, because supposedly the Gcam Mod is better. Well, take this and then the other one and then compare, and then we'll see. Okay, so let's see what actually changed, because this is the front-facing video cam in 1080p of the Xiaomi Mi 9, but not using the stock camera app. What I'm using here is the Gcam Mod, which supposedly delivers way better microphone quality. I'll be able to judge that once I see this video. You can do it now. But it would actually be funny if the porting community achieves something that Xiaomi can't do on their own phones. Otherwise, the stabilization seems actually better, because there was none on the stock camera app. The crop seems fine. I don't seem to have the exposure issue so much as I did outside, so everything seems fine. Yeah, we'll see.